So let's remind ourselves about grouping. I'm going to start with 10 objects and I want to put that into groups of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many groups have I made? Well done. I've got 5 in each group, but I've made 2 groups of 5. Earlier in the week we looked at the division sentence as meaning shared by. Today we're going to think about it meaning grouped. I have grouped 10 objects into groups of 5, and that made 2 groups. 10 objects put into groups of 5 made 2 groups. 10 divided by 5 equals 2. Now I'm going to think about grouping my 10 objects into groups of 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. I have grouped 10 objects into groups of 2. And that has made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups. 5 groups of 2. Now I'm going to try and write that as a division sentence. I started with 10, so my first number is always the number I started with. I started with 10 and I divided that into groups of 2, and that made 5 groups. 10 objects divided into groups of 2 made 5 groups. So it is pretty much the opposite of sharing. It is just another way that we can help us work out division. I'd like you to join in this one with me. So can you please pause and get 8 small objects? Okay, I would now like you to put those 8 objects into groups of 4. Pause now and put your 8 objects into groups of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I've made equal groups of 4. How many groups have I made? Shout it out at me. Well done. Hopefully you made the same. You made 2 groups of 4. Let's write that as a division sentence. So I start with 8 and I divide it into groups of 4. See if you can pause here and write down the answer. I started with 8 and I grouped them into groups of 4. How many groups did it give me? Pause and write down the number sentence. Hopefully you wrote 2. 8 objects grouped into groups of 4 has made 2 groups. Well done everybody. So we're keeping the same number, we've still got 8 cubes. This time I'd like you to pause and split it into groups of 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. I've split my 8 objects into groups of 2 and they're all equal. How many groups has that made? Pause and write it down. How many groups have I made? I've made 4 groups of 2. 1, 2, 3, 4 groups with 2 in each group. Let's turn that into a division sentence. So I started with 8 and I grouped them into groups of 2. See if you can pause the video and work out the answer. I had 8 objects and I've put them into groups of 2. What has that made? Well done. Just like before, the answer is the number of groups. I've made 4 groups. Now I would like you to get 6 objects, group them into groups of 3 and then play the video. So pause, 6 objects into groups of 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I've grouped my 6 objects into groups of 3. How many groups did that make? It made 2 groups. Let's write that as a division sentence. I started with 6. Now I would like you to pause and try and finish my sentence. Remember, I had 6 objects and I've grouped them into groups of 3, and that has made 2 groups. See if you can write that number sentence. Let's look all together. I had six objects and I've grouped them into groups of 3, and that has made 2 groups. 6 divided by 3 equals 2. You might be spotting a pattern with some of these, finding it easier to pick them up. Some of you might be thinking that you found it easier sharing rather than grouping, and that's fine. Some people find sharing the best way to divide and some people find grouping the best way. But we learn both to make sure that we always know the best way to answer questions. Okay, now you need 12 objects. So can you pause and grab 12 objects? We looked at the number 12 yesterday, and there were lots of different ways we could group the number 12. You were able to group it into groups of 4, groups of 3. Some of you even grouped into groups of 6 and groups of 2. There were lots of different ways that you could group it. Let's start by putting it into groups of 4. So can you pause and split 12 into groups of 4? That means having 4 in each group. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. How many groups have I made? 1, 2, 3. 3 groups of 4. Let's think about that as a division sentence. What number do I always start with? Well done. I'm starting with 12 and I'm dividing into groups of 4. Pause here and see if you can finish my number sentence. 12 objects divided into groups of 4 equals... Well done. It equals 3. What I'd like you to do now is pause the video and see if you can complete that for my other 3 numbers. So split 12 into groups of 3 and then write the number sentence starting with 12 divided by, then split into groups of 6 and then groups of 2. So by the end you will have 4 number sentences. So pause now and give it a go. Okay, let's see how you got on. So we did number 1 by us all together. The next one, I want you to split 12 into groups of 3. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. How many groups did I make? 1, 2, 3, 4. I split it into 4 groups of 3. And my number sentence we know starts with 12. 12 divided into groups of 3 equals 4 groups. Give yourself a tick or a fix. Well done, everybody. So on the other side, we had 2 other questions. So the first one, I want you to split into groups of 6. Let's have a look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've split my 12 objects into 2 groups of 6. So my number sentence would be 12 objects divided into groups of 6 equals 2. I've had to go a bit wonky there, sorry about that. Give yourself a tick or fix your work. Well done, everybody. And lastly, I wanted you to split 12 into groups of 2. So I've got 2, 1, 2. Make sure you're being really careful with your counting. Okay, I have split 12 into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 groups of 2. And to write that as a number sentence, I would write 12 grouped into groups of 2 equals 6 groups. Give yourselves a tick or a fix. Oh, you can't quite see the bottom of my number 2 there, but this number here does say 2. It's your turn! So on Google Classrooms, you will find some questions asking you to group objects into groups and work out the division sentence. There is the enable option if you would like some help writing your number sentence. And then your second job is to complete some word problems by grouping. Well done everybody, that was a really challenging topic to learn, but you have been brilliant, and tomorrow we're going to practice both sharing and grouping. So well done everyone, and I'll speak to you tomorrow.